Welcome to MacroCode. If you're new to this channel, consider subscribing. So today we are going to proceed with our .NET MAUI mobile app. So if I just launch our app, our previous video we have been creating a login page. So we are yet to start now interacting with our API. So on this video, we are going to create a simple API to demonstrate how we can be able to logging in. So today's video, we are going to create our API that we'll be using to interact with our mobile app. So let's just launch our app and see how it is based on our previous video. So if you're new to this channel, consider watching some of our previous videos so that you can be able to understand where we are. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and like the video. So let's launch our app and see how it is. There we are, our app is launching. So let's see how our app looks like before we proceed to create the API. So we are going to create an API that we are going to use to log in and actually pull data from MS SQL. So we are going to use MS SQL to demonstrate that. So you can see on our mobile app, we need to pass the email address and we also need to pass the password. So if you click that, then currently it does nothing and we have actually validated. So if you don't pass the email address, then it will be able to give you an alert. So let me just relaunch so that you're able to see. So this is how our code looks like. So if you come to our login page, we have our login page here. Then our login page view model, you can see we are defining the email address and the password. Then we are going to use the I command. So some of you guys may be wondering why we are using this. You can also actually change this. Just delete that as you can see. Then, so let me just undo. So because we are tying this to a login command, then we can actually say login, then do away with this. Then here I can just use I relay, you can say relay command. So you can actually use relay command. So if we just do that, it will actually work the same way we have been, the same way we use the other command. So this one, so let me just undo so that you can be able to see. So if I just undo, you see all this code for I command, login command, all this code can be replaced by only this single code. So if we just do that, then we comment down this one, can just comment this and we have this as login. So this relay command will actually add something called command. So don't add this keyword. It will actually add it by itself. So just have it as login. Then when you come to the login page.xaml, you'll actually type in login then command. So you can actually replace that. So for those who want to use relay command, you can actually do that. So I'll just put in replaced with relay command. So you can actually do that so that you can avoid and minimize some of the codes that you can write. So it's actually simple to do this than to actually write all this kind of code. So if we just open our app, if we just have our breakpoint here, it will actually do the same thing. So if I just click, you can see it is actually validating. So if I click, it is actually giving me this kind of error. So we have actually validated some of our fields to ensure that we don't pass empty email address and the password. So this is how our app looks like. So we need to log into this app. So to begin with, we are going now to create our API. So I'll just come to new, then a new project. So I'm going to create a new project. So I'm going to create a new project. So on this new project, I'm going to use ASP.NET Core Web API template. So you can see we have it here. So a project template for creating a SPNet core application with an example controller for RESTful HTTP service. So I'm going to go with that. So if I click next, I've chosen my directory. So this is my directory. You can choose the location. Then I'm going to say this is employee app API. So if I just click next, I'm going to use .NET 7.0 standard term support, then configure HTTPS. So in case you want to enable Docker, you can actually do that. But for us, we are going to leave it as it is. Then if you want to have, you enable Open API support, you can also choose that. But in case if you want to use minimal APIs, then you can uncheck that, then you'll be able to use minimal APIs. But for us, let's use controllers. So we actually did a video about minimal APIs. So if you want to check that, you can consider watching our previous videos. We'll actually tie the link down below for the minimal APIs. So this is how our API look like. We have the controller, weather forecast, then we have the class, then we have the program.cs, and we have the app settings.json. So if I just launch this, we are going to have our API. So this is our API that we intend to use it on our mobile app. So that is how it looks like. So we have the employee API and we have the weather forecast. So if we just try here, we'll get some data. You can see it is giving us some data. Now, let's proceed and do something. So let's add some of our nuggets. So we are going to use MS SQL. So come to right click, then manage nuggets. So I'm going to add SQL, so entity framework. So we can add entity framework. We are going to use entity framework. So I'll install that. So install entity framework, then install entity framework .SQL server. Then we need to install tools, entity framework core.tools. Then after we have done that, I think that is it. Come to our API. Let's create a folder, and we can call the folder data. We can call it DB context. So we'll have our DB context class here. So you can actually create our DB context class. So we can call it application DB context. So if we do that, then on our DB context, we need to inherit from DB context. Then here we need to have our constructor, public, application. So we'll just say application DB context. So we'll do that. Then we do that. So here we need to import something. So we need to import. So this is entity framework core. So you can say using Microsoft.entity framework core. Do that. Say DB context. Something is wrong somewhere. Yeah, so we are getting this error because we have done something here. You can see our folder is actually DB context. We need to rename this to, we can call it DB connection. So we have some conflicts there. So this should be DB connection. So ensure you don't rename it that way. So this is, then you can see it has now taken our DB context. So inside our DB context here, so you can actually define DB options. So DB options, then we specify our application DB context. So we'll do that. So this should be this way. then you can say options. So then we do that, we say base options, then we actually close it. So we have actually defined our application DB context. So the next thing that we are going to do, we need to register these on our program.cs file. So remember, we are using SQL, MS SQL. So come to program.cs. So inside here, we are going to do something here. So just here we can say builder.services.add DB context. Then we specify our DB context. It is application DB context. Then we provide options. So for our options, we'll say options dot use. So we are using SQL server. There we are. Then inside our SQL server, we'll say builder dot configuration. Then we'll say get connection string. Then we need to pass our connection string here. So here we'll have our default connection. Then we can actually use that. You can close it. So this get connection string, it should be able to get our default connection from our app settings.json. So on our app settings.json, we need to define our connection. So we need to define our connection string. So we'll say default. So here we now need to define our default connection. So our default connection will be our connection to the database. So what we need to do there on our default connection, we need to pass our server. So we need to pass our server, which is equals to that. Then I'm going to connect to my SQL. So let me just open my SSMS, that is SQL Server Management Studio. Then I'll show you how we need to connect to our, so this is my SQL, Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. I'm going to connect to it. Then, so on this, some of my database. So I'm going to create a database for a mobile app. So I'm going to call this employee. So that is our database. Then inside our database, I'm going to, so our SQL server, so I'm just right click, then properties. So our server name is this one. So I'm going to connect to my server name. So I'm going to connect, this will be my server name. Then the next thing is my database. So I'll just do database. Sorry, this should be this way. Just remove that, then say database. So my database will be employee, the one we have just created. Then our, so I'm going to have a trusted connection. So just borrow some things here. So our database name will be employee. Trusted connection, we have set this to true. Then multiple active result set, I've set this to true. Then trust server certificate, I've set this to true. The reason as to why I'm not including the server name, that is the SA and the password, I'm using Windows authentication. But in case you want to do that, then you can actually include, and even the port. So you can actually include that on our default connection. But for me, I'm actually using my machine, so that's why I'm using that. But you can also check how to configure that and apply the SA password and the password to connect to your database. So after we have done with that, our default connection now is here. The next thing that we need to do, remember we had created our app, and our app had some fields. So let's create some folders that will hold our models. So here we can have our models. Then inside our model, we can create our first model called employee. So these our employee will have some of the fields. So when you go back to our mobile app, we have our mobile app with some of the database that we had created. So when you come to application DB context, we have our databases, our tables. We have actually our tables. So we have the employee, country, constituency, location, sublocations, and the village. So we are going to actually borrow some of these fields. So for the employee, these are some of the fields that we have. So I'm going to copy this and have it on our API. Sorry, so I'm going to have that on our API. So you can see this is what it is now. We have this on our API. Then I'm going to create another one the same way we had on our app country. I'm going to create another class for country. Then I'm going to borrow every field from our app. So I'm going to do that. Then I'm going also to borrow something from our app, which is locations. There we are. Then I'm going to borrow the fields. So that is it. I'm going also to create for sublocation. Then I'm going to borrow the fields. So for those who are new to this channel, consider subscribing and watching our previous videos. So the next thing I'm going to borrow is the village. So this is my village. Then I'm going also to borrow some of the data fields from our app. So from our app, we have the country, where this is it. Then we have the employee. Something is going, it should be public int. Then sublocation and the village. So I'm going to add some things here. I'm going to add another model called base. So I'm going to add base model. So on my base model, I'm going to have something like date time. Then these will be created on. Then going to have another thing called modified on. Then here we are going to have a string, say created by. Then I'm also having here modified by. So we'll be changing this based on how we feel it necessary on our. So on every model, so we can have these as, so we can actually define these as a public abstract class. So abstract. Then we can borrow these from our base. So this will be our base model. So then we can now have these on each of our models. So we can do that. Then on our location, we can also do that. The sublocation, we do that. Then village, we also do that. So the next thing that we are going to do is to have these on our application DB context. So we need to create these fields on our database. So come to our application DB context, then we say public DB set. Then we pass our model employee. Then what is the name of our database, of our table? We are going to call it employees. So do the same for others. So I'll just copy this. Then I'm going to say here country. Then our table name will be countries. Then this will be location. Then our table name will be locations. Then sublocation. Then these will be sub locations. Then this will be our village. Then sorry, this will be our village. Then this is our villages. So that is our tables. So this is our tables. So for these tables, we are going now to be saving data here. Now, what we need to do is now to create our endpoints. So I'm going to create the first endpoint for villages. So I'm going to add new item. Then I'm going to go to web. Then I'm going to go to API controller with read and write. Let me just undo that. Let's try add new. Then we can scaffold. Let's try add. Then new item, new scaffold item. Then we can choose API controller with actions using entity framework, API with read. So we can go with this. Then we are going to choose the model. So for in my case, I'll start with the village. Then I'll choose the application DB context. Then our controller name will be a village controller. So if I just create that, it will actually create for us all the codes for CRUD, that is the create, read, and update endpoints. So let's just wait and see. So our API is ready. So for villages, you can see our root is the API controller. You pass the controller name. Then this is our village controller. So to get the villages, we have the get villages. It will give us the list of all the villages. Then if you want to get the village by ID, we supply the ID, then we are able to do that. So this is the list of all the entries. So we can now do the same for our sublocation. So I'll just choose sublocation. Then do that again. So we have our sublocations controller already created. We can do the same for our locations. So that is it. So for those who are new to this channel, consider subscribing. Comment down below in case you have any suggestion. Then we can be able to incorporate. So we have our locations and controller. So we are going to do another one. So the next thing is after locations, we can do country, or we had, I think there is something we missed, so we'll check that. So we missed constituency table from our mobile app. So after so it's scaffolding. So you can see it has actually done everything for us. So that is the best thing about it. So we can also do for the employee a new scaffold item. Then we can choose the employee. Then you can see it is creating our countries controller, locations controller, sublocations controller, villages, and we have the default one, a weather forecast controller. So currently it is generating our employees. You can see we have our employees controller. We can get the employees, get the employee by ID. We can actually update the employee data, and we can post employee record. So that is it. So the next thing that we missed to borrow is our constituency under the mobile app. So we have this table called constituencies. So we'll come back to our API under models. Let's create the constituency class. Then there we are. We can have the base model, which will have the details. Then we can borrow the details from our mobile app. Then this data, we can have our fields here. Then we can now register these on our DB context. So come on our DB context, I can copy this. Then we can have a constituency here. So the table name will be constituencies. Then we need to now create the controller, scaffold, API controller with actions using entity framework. Then we need to choose the constituency. This will be our controller name. So if we add, we are expecting the controller constituency to appear there. So let's see, there we are. So we have our API controller constituency. So the next thing that we need to do on our application DB context, we have all these tables. But now we don't have those tables on our database. So our database, you can see it is here. We don't have any tables on our database. So we need to apply migration so that we have those tables here. So we are using what we call the code first approach to actually effect this. But you can also start with the tables, then you actually create the models. But I usually prefer doing this. You create first the models, then you can apply that to your tables. So to our database. So what we need to do, come to our package console. So this is our package management console. Then we can say add migration. Then we give the name of the migration, initial migration. So I'll zoom so that you can be able to actually see that. So if I press enter, it should actually create for us SQL statements that will be used to create our table. So you can see what it has done. It has created for us a folder called migrations. So if you come to our project, we had not created a folder called migrations, but you can certainly see we have a folder called migrations, and we have our initial migration name, the name that we provided to our migration. This is the name of our migration. You can see it here. So it has created, if you click that folder, that file name, we have our constituencies. So it has actually created, this is the code, create table. It will create a table called constituencies with some of these fields. It will also create the countries with all these fields, then employees with all those fields, locations. So in order to effect this to our database, we are going to now update our database with these tables. So to do that, we'll say update database. So you can do that and then maybe supply the migration name, or you can just leave it as it is. So if we just do update database, it should be able to update our database with all those fields. You can see this is what is happening. So it is actually generating the commands. You can see it is generating the commands to actually create our tables. So you can see create table. This is SQL statements. We have the next one here. We have the other one here and the rest. So if it is done, you'll receive this message done. So if you come to our database, we should be able to see those tables. So you can see these are the tables. We have the constituency tables. If we just select top 1000, then we have the country ID and every of the, so the countries table is here. We have the employees table. So we have the employees table, you can see. You have the locations table and the villages table. Then the next thing that it has done, you can see at the top here, we have the EF migration history. This will actually track our migrations history. We see the product version is this one, then our migrations name. So if you do a lot of migrations, then you'll have all the version history being tracked here. And the same thing, our files will be also be incremented on our migrations folder. So you'll have all those migrations files here. So that is it, guys. So we have been able to create our table. We have created our endpoints. So let's launch our API and see how it looks like. So this is our API that we'll be using for our demo to create our mobile app. So you can see we have now our API with constituencies. Those are the endpoints that we can use to get the constituencies, post we post the constituencies, the update and even delete countries, employees, allocations, and sublocations, villages. So to start with, let's start by maybe creating a village. So if we do that, we can create a village. So to create a village, I mean the country, we can pass the country, say KE, then this will be Kenya. We can leave the others as it is. So if I just post this, it has actually created a country called Kenya. So if we just come to our database and right click, then select, we should be able to see that there is a country called Kenya. Now the created by and these ones we can update to give it the name of who we are. So to do that, we are going to run the put function. So this put will supply the ID as 1. Then we can update the created by, we can say macro. Then a modified whereby you can say macro. So then the ID will say 1. Then this is KE. Then you can say Kenya. So if we just update, it should be able to update our data. Something went wrong. So you can say macro. Then so let's see our ID. It's 1. So if we just execute, let's see our table. So you can see it has actually updated. So macro. So that is it. So we can add as many countries as we can. So you can see here, we can say Zambia. You can say Zambia. Then you can just use this. So that is an output. So it should be actually at the top here. So this should be macro. This is macro. Then we can, if we execute, we should be able to get our Zambia. So this, it has taken Kenya again. I think we didn't change it. So we can do away with that. We can say Zambia. So if we execute, it should give us Zambia. You can see Zambia. So our endpoint for countries is working. So these are some of the endpoints that we'll be using to actually communicate with our mobile app. So if you like the video, comment down below. So we'll also be adding JSON web tokens and be able to see how we'll be accessing the tokens before we log into our mobile app. So if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing and see you on our next video. Bye.